Hi everyone, it's April 25th. We're your hosts, Doc, J, and JD, and you guys are listening and watching the Full Court Press podcast. I love that intro so much. So much. Guys, thank you for stopping by. Make sure you like and subscribe for the channel. It really helps us out. And thanks for coming and listening. JD, I think we should start with the playoff picture that's been going on, especially since we gave our predictions last time. I really want to start with the Bucks and the Heat. So after watching this series, Giannis had a very unfortunate injury, and I still don't think he's 100% or relatively close to that. I think he's just a tough guy trying to play it through. But you can't take credit away from Jimmy Butler. Man, Jimmy Buckets set a franchise record last night with 56 points in a playoff game. Oh my gosh. He's amazing. He had 22 points in the first quarter. Normally he's not a three-point shooter, but was able to connect pretty much everywhere last night. And I'll tell you what, he literally carried the Heat to that victory because the fourth quarter, there was a 28-5 run, which is bonkers. But they were able to close out on the Bucks, and you can't take credit away from Jimmy. That was incredible.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Doc. I was telling you the other day, just yesterday, I was watching the game, and then I see that the Bucks are up 10 in the fourth quarter, something like 5 minutes left. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, the Bucks, they're the number one seed. They're my favorite to go to the finals. So I'm thinking, okay, they're going to close this out against the Heat. And so I kind of stopped watching. And then I come back to it, and then somehow the Heat are up. And I'm like, what is going on here? I had to rewatch the highlights. But Jimmy Butler, you have to give him credit where credit is due. The guy is just a bucket getter. He's carrying the team even after Hero has been injured. And I guess, I'll say it, the elephant in the room. A lot of these playoff games have been injured, like injury ridden. And so it's something to consider. Even Giannis, who's been back, who's not looking 100%. But you got to give credit to Jimmy Butler. I think that he's playing incredible. And this has been an interesting one. I think, they're up 3-1. There's a lot of games, a lot of series right now where there's the 3-1. But there's only been something like 12 or 13 teams in NBA history that have come back from that, that have been able to bring it back and win from a 3-1 deficit. I'm not counting out the Bucks yet. I think that Giannis really has a beast mentality. I know Jimmy Butler probably does too, but it's somebody I really like. I think that he has what it takes to really bring his team back. So I think this is going to be a really exciting series. It would be really sad to see if Giannis can't really pull it out because of an injury. But the Heat don't have Hero, and Bam Adebayo. I think for Bam, I'm a Bam fan. I think he really needs to step it up. I think you mentioned he only had 14 points this last game.
Yeah.
So I think he really needs to.
He's not been looking good or matching up well with Brook Lopez whatsoever. Brook, that same night, last night, went up for 35 points. Brook Lopez did. So he's just been bullying Bam this entire time. But the Bucks are going to have to win the next three. So this is now really intriguing because I really believe that they'll head back to Milwaukee and the Bucks are going to smash the Heat. But then what are they going to do for the next two games? They have to go back to Miami for game 6. And if, Jimmy was out there screaming, this is my town, this is my city, and he proved it with a franchise record. So the Bucks have a lot of work in front of them to do.
Absolutely desperation mode right now for the Bucks.
Yes.
They have to really pull out all the stops. And I'm feeling it for Giannis. I know he's not 100%, but he really has to, give his 100% this next game, I'm thinking.
Yeah, he has to. He has to have a monster game for them to
Yeah.
be able to pull this out. And I think that if you're Mike Budenholzer, you really start to put a lot of emphasis on your shooters as well. Like one of the reasons they went and got Pat Connaughton, Joe Ingles, Jay Crowder is a decent shooter, Grayson Allen. Those are some really lethal 3-point guys. So I think that there needs to be some emphasis on that, and that way they can actually space the floor for Giannis so he can do his thing instead of the Heat just kind of closing in on him like they normally do once he gets to the basket.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think just moving on, I think another really exciting series to talk about just in the East is the Knicks and the Cavs.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going a way that I was not expecting. And I wanted to ask you something, Doc. I would say, the Cavs, they seem, they have Donovan Mitchell, who's a playoff superstar, one of the guys who scored more points than anybody in playoff history, who seems to not be doing the best. And then you got, those other star players, Evan Mobley. You got great defense through Jared Allen, Darius Garland as well, who I consider to be a star. And they're going up against the Knicks, who are an up-and-coming team, who acquires Jalen Brunson out of the trade last season. And they've just been stellar. But I think a lot of people expected the Cavs to dominate,
Oh, we both did.
I got to ask you, who would you say is more at fault? Like, are the Cavs underperforming, or do you think the Knicks are overperforming here?
That's a great question. I think that the Cavs are underperforming, not to take away from what New York is doing, what they're doing defensively with Josh Hart and Julius Randle and Brunson. Everyone is bought into the Tom Tibbs defensive schematic in New York. And it's showing because they are stealing, they're getting stops, and they are doing the full court press on Don and Darius every single time they try to make the ball up the court. But ultimately, I think that if the Cavs were to just play their normal season stats, they'd be doing a lot better. I think a lot of that has to do with youth. Donovan really is the only person in the starting lineup who's made it to the playoffs before. No one else has yet. And so they all are they probably have never experienced playing this many games, because they're so used to the season ending at 82, and now they're extending and playing more. There's probably some mental and physical fatigue for these young guys, but it's also Donovan Mitchell's job to rally his guys. And I'm sorry, I love Donovan Mitchell. I love the Spider. I own his shoes. But you cannot be getting 11 points, 4 assists, and 5 rebounds in a game 4. That is completely inexcusable. And Donovan owned it as well in his press conference afterwards. But this is your team, man. You got to show these guys. You have to mentor these guys. Not only do you have the experience, you are the oldest player, the oldest starter on this team. This is your team. You need to lead these guys. So I think that, as much as I love Don, he has a lot of work he's going to have to accomplish. And this is a good way for Cleveland to get their feet wet. They're going to have to come back better because they're after losing that game and being down 3-1, the Cavs aren't going to win this series.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very tough to come back from this deficit, especially against a Knicks team who are
they're surging
so well. And
they're
Jalen
surging
Brunson,
right now.
I got to talk about Jalen Brunson, give him cred. He's a guy who was a nominee for the most improved player. And I think the reason he didn't really get it is because people knew that he was a beast, just coming in from last year when they were in Dallas and they beat Utah with Donovan Mitchell again. I mean, you said it, last podcast, Jalen Brunson is Donovan Mitchell's kryptonite. And it's been like that this series as well. I'm going to give some some credit to Donovan, though. I do think he's got that mentality in him, and I think this next game he's going to come out and probably score 30 to 40 points. Remember, I said that.
Okay, it's locked in. And I would not be surprised if he did either, because Donovan is going to come out swinging, especially with them going back to Cleveland. The problem is, what are they going to do when they get back to Madison Square Garden?
Good point. I mean, Don's
they have to be ready.
He's a competitor, but we'll have to see.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
just the Bucks. Those first two series, this is exciting because both of them are on the verge of becoming massive upsets.
Yeah,
I mean, the Heat as the 8th seed, then the 5th seed taking out the 4th seed. Like, this is exciting. This has been an exciting playoff run so far.
Oh, for sure.
We have 3 teams that are up tonight that all should be advancing. Just like what JD was saying, there are a lot of 3-1 leads right now. Tonight, I think we're unanimous in thinking Denver, Boston, and Phoenix all should move on to the second round, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's not too much to say about these teams. I would say Denver, I think, probably has the lock. I think that the Timberwolves are still a little bit in turmoil. I think that they're trying to keep this team together. I think Cat, I got to say something about Cat real fast. I'm just not a big fan of him anymore. And maybe I never really should have been. I think that, he's playing video games. He's just kind of sitting around. I don't know if you heard that interview, but they were interviewing Conley, and he was just mentioning that you have to have that mentality. You have to really have a drive to play and not be playing video games. And then Cat on the side is like, what are you talking about? It was just like crazy, and and it's, I think Cat is, the reason that they're not doing well. I don't know if you really know this either, but Timberwolves have the worst, they're the worst organization of all organizations in like professional leagues, which is crazy to think about. I mean,
how come?
They're the most losingest organization of all organizations, including the baseball, basketball, football, the WNBA. And so, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that and stuff like that. But I mean, Cat, and I feel bad for Ant Edwards. I think the guy's a superstar. I think Cat just maybe doesn't have the mentality. He's like a worse version of Joel Embiid. Just doesn't have that playoff grind in him. Maybe we'll have to see what they do next year. I remember you mentioning that they might finish 5th or 6th. They definitely have the potential to do so. They have great players, but I don't know, man. I just don't think they have like a great org. Maybe they don't have the locker room as they should, and maybe that's why they brought in Conley. But I think that one's probably over there. Do you have anything to add on that?
I do if you're a Timberwolves fan. And I want to float this out to everyone who's listening who is a Timberwolves fan. So one of the reasons Rudy Gobert was so successful in Utah was because of Alex Jensen. He was the primary assistant coach who worked with Rudy Gobert and helped him understand the defensive schematics that made him the juggernaut he was in Utah. With that said, Will Hardy is not going to be retaining Alex Jensen on his coaching staff next year. So if you're the front office of Minnesota, at least if I was, that'd be one of the first phone calls I'm making. Hey, Alex, you're going to love it here in Minnesota. It's beautiful. To try to see if you can't maximize Rudy Gobert. And then honestly, I think Ant is incredible. You know what you're going to get from him. Conley's consistent. You have Rudy as well. So then you really do have to look at Cat. And the question I would propose is, do you look at trades to see if you can't get back some of the trade, draft capital you gave up for Rudy Gobert? Because Ant is their future. I don't think giving up on Rudy would be a good idea. I think bringing in the coach that worked with him his entire career to maximize him would be a great idea, And then you have the consistency of Conley as well. But yeah, I think it might be time.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a good idea. It's definitely something to consider because I think that Cat, he's definitely an incredible player. We've seen how dominant that he can be, but if he's not a good fit with Minnesota, maybe maybe he needs to be traded, And I think I remember Jimmy Butler saying something about that as well, is that, Cat really doesn't have that strong mentality when he was playing together, when he
Right.
was with the Timberwolves organization. But yeah, it's definitely something to consider. And if I'm a Timberwolves fan, I might be leaning towards that. Just I'd probably love Cat, but you also have to consider the fact that maybe he just doesn't have that competitive nature in him, and
And on
maybe
the
you should
flip
try and get
side,
that trade.
and on the flip side, what can you get for him player wise, and how many picks can you get for him? I bet you could get at least
You
at
could get good
least
haul.
three at least three first rounders and probably a couple of really decent role players back,
Yep.
depending on who you're talking to. Since we're talking about off seasons too, let's look at Atlanta. So Atlanta just got Quinn Snyder, who used to be head coach of the Utah Jazz, just picked up the head coach position for Atlanta, and was able to will them into the playoffs, which just shows you the genius that is Quinn Snyder. So when he was in Utah, he had quite a firm grasp on his roster. He likes to, have an input on what pieces are going to be playing for him. So with that said, JD, let me ask you this. Who do you think is going to be on the Hawks roster come next season? Just out of the starting lineup. So we have John Collins, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, Clint Capella. Who am I missing?
They have DeAndre Hunter. I'm not sure if he's a
DeAndre Hunter.
starter, but
Well, let's go with those five. Who do
Sure.
you think any of those five are going to get moved?
Well, here's what I'm thinking, Doc. I like Atlanta's roster. I think that they have a ton of great talent. I think there must be something going on. I mean, you look at Atlanta, you look at Boston. Boston's probably going to close out Atlanta this next game. Boston, has that great roster. They've got great coordination. They're going to be moving on. And Atlanta keeps dropping out of the playoffs. Their first round exits, they're not really getting great draft capital. Year after year, it's just like, if you're having a mediocre program, what are you doing? And so I've heard a lot about Trae Young and some trades regarding him. I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's been a lot of trade rumors that have been going on with Trae Young, that maybe he's at fault for the past coaches who have been fired. He's just not been good in the locker room. And granted, these are rumors. This might be speculation. We're not in there as well. And they've even mentioned, they had a players poll about Trae Young being the most overrated player in the NBA by far. So maybe a lot of people are not, too high on him. And so they bring in Quinn Snyder. They give him a multi-year contract. And so they're basically saying, this is our guy for the future.
Oh, yeah.
So if Trae Young can't get with him, then he's probably out. And so there's been trade rumors around him. They even ask Trae Young about it. They say, have you heard about the trade rumors, that have been going on with you? This is before the playoffs, which is probably maybe affecting him a little bit as well. He says they might be true, they might be not. That's a weird thing to say, especially considering they asked Luka about this about a month ago, and he turned it down. He said, no, there's no trade rumors going on. And so, with Trae Young, it's very interesting to hear. It's probably where there's smoke, there's fire, And is he going to be on the roster next year? I don't know. He might get traded. I think that he's going to stay on at least one more year. And if they make, playoffs 8th seed or play in or something again, he's out of there.
Yeah, I think ever since Quinn has showed up, Clint Capella and DeJounte Murray have looked fantastic. They've looked great under Quinn. The only person who has not looked very good, in my opinion, is Trae Young, because Hunter has looked a lot better. Even John Collins. You can tell that John Collins is accepting his role with the team, and he's just hustling out there. He's not putting up the best stats, but he's still hustling, playing defense. You can tell when you watch Atlanta who's bought in and who hasn't, by who's running up and down the floor, and who's trying to get offensive rebounds, and who's trying to defensively get stops. Trae Young is not a part of that. So I could definitely see him, especially being their best player subjectively, being on the trading block for sure. Can you imagine? You could get a lot for Trae Young.
Yeah, you probably could multiple
Definitely
first rounders and everything.
You know,
Yeah,
especially if maybe you even look at pairing him with Luka and
that's
see
an
what
interesting thought.
Dallas would be willing to hand over.
It'd be interesting to think. I think they're both very ball dominant guys, so I'm not sure what it would be, but maybe they'd work. I'd say moving on, with the playoff race, we've got Denver, who's we've talked a little bit about. They're probably going to destroy the Timberwolves. Boston,
Absolutely.
Phoenix will be advancing. I don't know how I'm feeling about Kawhi Leonard lately. I think the guy, I don't know if you've heard, but on Stephen A. on ESPN said that he should retire, which is quite a bold statement, but it's something to definitely consider. It seems like the guy
It
doesn't
is.
even like to play basketball
He
anymore.
doesn't play games. You
It's
can't be paying a guy 30 plus million who's not going to play games.
And a lot of the Clipper fans, as well as the players, are fed up with him. Like he seems fine. He has that quiet demeanor, so you're never really sure what he's like. And then, out of nowhere, you find out that he can't play the next game when you need him. He's just when you think that he's going to be like an absolute animal, he performs so well in a couple of the games in the playoffs. He just falls out, and then it's like, all right, well, Phoenix is going to advance. So it's just like, it's frustrating as an NBA fan. It's frustrating, I'm sure, as a Clipper fan. And maybe he should consider retiring. I don't think he will. But it seems like he just doesn't love the game. He's not passionate about it. He's always benched, for his health, for load management. It's just like, come on, man, you got to play.
I'll tell you this, the next contract he gets is going to be significantly less than whatever he's getting now. I'm sure he has like the max deal. I'm sure he's sitting very comfortably with that contract. There's no way that man is going to get anything remotely close to that after the piss poor past few years that has been the Clippers, The best thing about that team right now is Paul George. PG-13 still looks amazing. He really does. And in a podcast recently, he admitted that he cannot be the best player on a championship team, which means that he knows his role as a number two and has accepted it. And how many guys of his caliber can you say will accept that role? I don't know a lot that are willing to do that. So PG is that guy who wants to win. He's fantastic. He's been carrying that team the entire season while Kawhi has been sitting there in street clothes. So I agree with you, man. There's no way he's going to get anything significant, Nick. Whenever his contract's up, I think he might have 2 years left. I'd have to double check that. But there's no way he gets anything.
The Clippers, they were a young and exciting team before Kawhi came in. They had Shea. They had a young core that were looking pretty decent. And they took a shot. They're like, let's try and get Paul George. Let's try and get Kawhi Leonard. They did it, and it just doesn't seem like it's really panned out for them. And so I hope that they have a better future.
This is the danger of taking your shot with super teams. Because how many of these super teams, quote unquote, besides the Lakers in the bubble, have worked out? Golden State's homegrown. The Bucks have all their homegrown talent. Toronto, they took a swing on Kawhi. That was incredible. But then he left right afterwards. And there's just not a lot. I think there's a lot of danger with trying to formulate and create a super team in today's NBA. Look at the Nets. The Nets probably had the greatest super team experiment ever. They had KD, Kyrie, and James Harden, and they couldn't put anything together. Kyrie goes to Dallas. They're supposed to be a great pairing. They can't even make the playoffs. And speaking of that, there's been a lot of trade rumors around Luka Doncic, especially centering around the Utah Jazz. So, excuse me, let me ask you this, JD. What do you think about that? Do you think that Luka could play alongside Lauri Markkanen, who is emerged as one of the cornerstones of the Utah Jazz's franchise? And how would that look, in your opinion?
This is an interesting one.
It
No,
is.
he's definitely a superstar in my eyes. He's a top 5 player. This is coming from a Utah Jazz fan. And I'm really trying, it seems like anywhere Luka would go, he would maybe make his team better. Anybody would want him. That's probably the consensus thought on him.
Mhm.
And I mean I've heard these rumors. In fact, if you just typed in Google Luka Doncic, one of the top stories was Luka to Utah, from Sports
Mhm.
Illustrated. So there have been trade rumors around it. Do I think it's likely? No, I don't know. I don't think so. He's a young guy. He's a franchise player. I don't think the Mavs are going to be giving him up. But what's interesting to think about it is, like we mentioned before, where there's smoke, there's fire. If there's
Mhm.
some reports, some of the top stories are talking about him going to Utah, of all places, then that means there's probably been some talks about it, which is very interesting. It's intriguing. Utah has a ton of draft capital. They could
Mhm.
probably make it happen. Luka could get a big haul anywhere. You get a ton of good players, you get a ton of good draft capital. But it's interesting that, maybe Utah's trying to go after him. Would he be a good pairing with Markkanen? So Luka, in my eyes, I do like Luka. I think Luka is an incredible player. Like I said before, I think he's a top 5 player. But I also think that he might not have a competitive mentality. Sometimes I see, and this might be a hot take, but how
Mhm.
many times have we seen Luka whining about calls, not getting back on defense,
Right.
coming in overweight in the off season? I mean, he's obviously a talent, but almost like you could compare him a little bit to Cat. Cat is a superstar talent, but maybe he doesn't have the competitive nature, the mentality to have what it takes to be like a top 10 player, or to get his team or will his team to the playoffs. I wonder if Luka's like that too. I mean, it's early to say. I think he's like 23, 24 still. Would
Mhm.
I want him in Utah? Yeah. I mean, maybe. I think it would be a fun switch of things. Maybe that would be what the Jazz needed. I remember Danny Ainge saying that he wants the team to be a competitor for a championship ring in the next 2 to 3 years. And so you need to make crazy plays like that in order for it to happen. What do you think, Doc?
You know, I like Luca. I do. I do not see his, and when you think about it too, theoretically, if Luca were to ask out, that would be the only way Dallas would
Yep,
ever let him go. Mark
exactly.
Cuban came out in an interview and stated that he completely took the blame because it is his fault. It's his team for not being able to put together a championship team around Luca. He blamed it on take fouls and this and that. He thought that going into next season they would be just fine. They're just going to try to run it back. And there's actually been reports of them in advanced conversations with Dennis Lindsay for a consulting role in their front office. So I would assume Mark Cuban is going to do everything possible to try to keep Luca before Luka asks out if he does. With that said, if
Yeah.
Luka were to ask out, the Utah Jazz are probably one of the only teams who could construct a package robust enough to get him. So I could definitely see him going to Utah. I think the fit would be a little different for him because he is used to complaining quite a bit at every call. And the the head coach of the Utah Jazz, Will Hardy, has put an emphasis on redirecting and restructuring the culture here in Utah. They play hard, they play fast, they get out in transition, and they don't go away. You can be up by 20 points, and they're still going to find a way to chip down that score and possibly beat you. Like the Utah Jazz in one season became a cultural phenomenon for us, especially here in Utah, in the sense that we're so used to watching our guys slowly and methodically take the ball up the court. And this is a young, athletic team that is going to fight you till the bitter end. And I loved the culture. That's a winning culture to me. And what I would be afraid of is Luca coming in could potentially upset the development of Lowry Marketing, who just won Most Improved Player of the Year, which he absolutely deserves. And I think he's going to continue to make steps and get better and better.
Yeah.
So I would just hope that if the Utah Jazz do decide to trade for Luka Doncic, I hope they don't give up too much. Though you'd have to give up quite a
Yeah.
bit for Luka, and I hope Luka comes here with the mentality of, okay, how can I make this team better, and like, can we really make a run here? And I think a lot of that would have to be him gelling with Will Hardy and
Mhm.
Lowry Marketing. So,
Sure.
and he would have to stop complaining about fouls. He'd have to play some defense because that's what the Jazz do. They play defense. And Will Hardy's going to play you hard.
Mhm.
You just have to be used to that. And I don't know if he could handle that. He might not like it here because of that.
If you think about it too, Doc, I mean, there could be definite pros and cons. And
Mhm.
like I mentioned, I'm not too sure that Luka's going to be parting ways with the Mavericks. But if he did come, there are some great defensive presences here in Utah. I mean,
Mhm.
one of which being Walker Kessler, who's been a
Yes.
great defensive player. And I even thought a little bit about Atlanta trading Gobert maybe to the Mavs, who's they absolutely need some sort of rim protector right now. And so maybe they'll go for that in the offseason. Or maybe with their number 10 pick, they'll go for somebody who's really good on defense, maybe someone like Derek Lively. I know he's projected to be a little bit higher than that, but that's absolutely what the Mavs need right now.
Yeah,
But
defensively they were atrocious, especially when they got Kyrie Irving.
for
There was
sure.
just no defense going on whatsoever. And the Utah Jazz do have a roster, I agree with that, where they could cover up his inability to defensively stay on the ball. They definitely could. They got some great pieces.
It would definitely be an interesting one. But do we want to move on to maybe the most electric series of the playoffs right now?
Oh my gosh, yes. Let's talk about Golden State versus the Kings.
Yes,
This
give
has
me your
been
thoughts on this one.
this has been everything I wanted it to be. The first two games were just wild, and just watching Golden State come out and really try to win game one, coming out in game two with a sense of urgency like it was game five, and still not being able to beat Sacramento. Um, Mike Brown, he understands the Golden State system because he used to coach with Steve Kerr. He has a young, athletic team that he is just running, saying, get out transition, run, run. They've been amazing. This is everything I've wanted it to be. And then, returning back to Golden State took that first game like it was nothing, but they had to play hard and barely escaped with their teeth in game four. This has been everything I wanted it to be. I love it. The stomp from Draymond Green was very unfortunate. But these teams are out there, they're beating each other up. The Kings have definitely been beaten up on the Warriors just as much as the Warriors have been beaten up on the Kings. So I've loved this series. I mean, this is the first time in Steph Curry's career where he was down 0-2 in 28 playoff performances. The first time. It's crazy. Like, this has been fantastic to watch. I still think this is going seven. I know you do too. I
Yeah.
mean, this is what we wanted. This is what we wanted from the series.
It's really tough to think about. It's it's tough maybe as a Golden State Warrior fan realizing that they're probably going to have the Kings will have the home court advantage at the end. But
Yeah.
you can't count out the Kings and you can't count out the Warriors. They're both playing incredibly. I think De'Aaron Fox is playing on another level. The
Oh my
guy's
gosh.
averaging 30 plus points in the playoffs. He was named the most clutch player this year, and he's showing it. I think he's turning into a superstar. I think that this year he's really become that superstar that maybe the Kings needed. Sabonis, he's had up and down a little bit in the playoffs, but they're coming together. And even Keegan Murray, a rookie who didn't have the greatest showing the first couple games, he's come out and he tore him up that last game with 20 plus points. And, he was coming and being a player that they really needed. So it'll be interesting to see if they really have the players to, finish up this series. Will Keegan Murray have another 20-point game? I don't know. Will Sabonis play better? Probably. Will Fox be a
I
staple?
hope
I
so.
do think so. I think I think Fox is going to be playing well through the rest of the series. When you look at Golden State, I mean, I know you had the Kings winning, and I had the Warriors winning. So it'll be interesting to see who finishes it. I do think it'll probably go to 7 games, like you were mentioning. It's just been such a close series. Who would have thought that the first round would be this fun, Doc?
I know this was the one I was most excited for. The Kings and the Warriors, and they have not disappointed whatsoever. And that game, I believe they played it. Nope, they don't play tonight. They play tomorrow night. But, oh man, I can't wait for that. All right, so we're running out of time, JD. Let's do a fun little segment before we go, though. That is going to be a new segment we do every couple of podcasts moving forward called "Who's the Guy?" Okay, so the guy today is going to be Damian Lillard, and Dame probably had the best stat line of his entire career, putting up 32.2 points, 7.3 assists. He was third in scoring and 10th in ball facilitation in the NBA this year at 32 years old. So my question, JD, is who is the guy? Who are you going to take? And we're going to start with Damian Lillard or Kyrie Irving.
Dame versus Kyrie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for me, this is kind of a no-brainer. I think Kyrie, he's had some problems off the court. I think that he's kind of a liability when it comes to that type of stuff. So I'm probably taking most players over Kyrie Irving. But based just solely off of talent,
fair.
I still will probably be taking Dame. I think Dame, he can be an assist-heavy leader as well, and he can shoot the ball well. Kyrie is an incredible ball handler. In my opinion, probably the best ball handler in the league right now. But I like Dame. I think Dame is maybe a little bit older than Kyrie, but he's still got years left in him to really thrive and succeed in the role. What do you think, Doc?
I would take Dame. Absolutely. I think Kyrie Irving, and I'm just going to be critical here. Kyrie Irving is a absolute dumpster fire and ruins every single team that he goes on. It's just, what has he done besides winning a ring with the Cavs back in like 2016?
With LeBron James.
With LeBron James. He went over to Boston, got hurt, couldn't help them whatsoever in that postseason. Good thing Jaylen Brown and Tatum emerged to take them to the ECF that year. He leaves there. He goes to the Nets. That's a complete crapshoot. He doesn't get vaccinated. He doesn't play. He hasn't played a full series of games since like 2016. He plays half a season. He causes problems everywhere he goes. He gets on social media and says terribly heinous things. And he's just a problem overall. It's a locker room issue. And I'm sorry, like at some point, like you could be the best player in the world, but if you can't play with a team, what good are you? So I'd take Dame all day. All right, next guy, we're going to do Dame versus Chris Paul.
For me, this is another no-brainer. I think Chris Paul is he's peaked about a few years ago. He's kind of running out of steam. You can kind of tell he doesn't really make the plays he used to. He doesn't shoot as much as he used to. He's having to heavily rely on Booker as well as Kevin Durant and the other players. He has a great mentality about him. I think he helped DeAndre Ayton become the player that he is right now. He's definitely a great player, a near star. And when he came out of the draft, he just wasn't looking too hot. So Chris Paul, he really has that leadership role who can really affect a team in a positive way. But I think Dame, Dame could also be a leader. Dame wants to win. He's got a competitive nature. He is just an absolute star. Like you mentioned before, he's probably had the best year he's ever had shooting-wise and assists. He's just like an incredible player. I still think that he can be a number one option on a championship team. I'm taking Dame.
Yeah, I am too. Absolutely. I think that the reason Portland has not been successful has nothing to do with Damian Lillard at all. I think that and once again, I don't mean to be critical, but it's a podcast and that's what we have to do sometimes. I think the front office in Portland has been completely unsuccessful with putting anything around Dame to help him be successful. This guy's out there playing his heart out every single night. He's clutch. He's gotten you to the Western Conference Finals before, and you're really telling me you failed to put a team around him? That's just inexcusable. And not only that, Dame is so loyal to the soil, he never talks about it. Everyone else talks about it. Dame never says a word about it. That's the kind of player I want in Utah. If he became available, I'd snatch him up in a heartbeat. All right, let's do Dame versus Tyrese Halliburton, the new first-time All-Star.
No, I think this one's a little bit more tougher. When I think of Halliburton, I think of a future superstar, a guy who's probably already a superstar, an incredible passer, a guy who has a great upside. And I think this is going to be, it's varied from team to team. I think if you're a team who is not trying to win right now, maybe a team like the Lakers, maybe a team like the Nuggets, those teams that are, trying to win a championship right now, maybe teams who are already contenders, you'd be taking Dame versus a team who's maybe on the precipice of becoming a contender. Maybe those 8th, 7th seeds or below might be taking Halliburton, who's a younger guy, who's got a tremendous upside, who can be an incredible player. I still think Dame, he's 32, but he's got 2 to 3 years of still being really great. I mean, look at Steph Curry, a guy who just turned 35. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Dame.
35.
He's still got a lot in him too. And Steph, maybe Steph's not that MVP caliber player like he was a few years ago, but Steph's still Steph. And I think Dame will still be Dame. So, it varies. If I'm Utah, I'm taking Halliburton.
I think I would take Dame Lillard again. I'm just a huge fan of this guy. And even though Tyrese Halliburton this year, in my opinion, was the best point guard in the NBA, because when you think about what a point guard does, they facilitate ball movement, right? They're the floor general. And he proved to be the most efficient floor general outside of James Harden in terms of assist to turnover ratio. I think that he has a bright future. I love Tyrese, and he makes something about him too that I noticed is when he got injured, his team tanked hard, and it's because Tyrese makes everybody better. He's not just looking for his own buckets. Like Benedict Mathurin was in the Rookie of the Year conversation because his catch and shoot numbers were electric because of Halliburton. When Halliburton left, Benedict Mathurin slowly started dropping off. He didn't look as good. But still, I'm a huge fan of Dame. And when you can put up numbers like that at 32 years old, I agree with you. I think that he has a similar style of play that Steph Curry does. And I think as long as he stays healthy, he's going to continue to play at that caliber for at least another 3 years. I think he has that in him. All right. Our next one is going to be Dame versus Jamal Murray.
Let's see. This one for me, I think I'm choosing Dame. I think that Murray, he has a lot of talent. I think that he's a great player, but I think Dame is just a tier above him, and I think he'll be a tier above him for the next few years. I like Murray. I like what he can do and what he can bring to a team, but I think I'm going to take Dame, maybe for most all teams as well.
So this one is tricky for me because Jamal had that MCL tear that totally just took him out of commission, and he was such a clutch player in the bubble. That's when he really emerged into the Jamal Murray that we all kind of know and love. Something I did notice this year that I really like is he came back, he averaged 20 points, he had a pretty solid season. Since the postseason has started, his numbers have jumped up considerably. So he's gone from 20 points to 28 points, and he's gone from 5 assists to almost 8. So there is a playoff mentality, and this works for some players where it doesn't versus others. Guys like LeBron James, Giannis, Jimmy Butler, Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell. There's like a playoff switch for some of these higher end guys where they're like, hey, it's time to like turn it on. And like I think that shows a mastery of athleticism and understanding your craft. And Jamal Murray has that. So if he had never gotten hurt, I think that he would be an even more devastating point guard and player. But I would love to see him return to form. I would love that. But I'm also going to go with Dame because Dame is Dame. And the reason the Trailblazers suck is not because of him. It's because of Portland's front office, period. Mm-hmm. All right, our last one is going to be Dame Lillard versus De'Aaron Fox, the most clutch player of the year, right?
Yeah, and this is tough for me. I really like Dame. I really like Fox. I think both players bring maybe different aspects. I think Fox is a young, really quick guy who's absolutely clutch, who I think you could rely on to be a number one option and just score the lights out. With Dame, he can also score. He could also be a number one option, but he also brings, really good passing, maybe some really good leadership. It's kind of tough for me. I think that it varies again from team to team. If you're a team that already has some players who dominate the ball, I'm probably going to be taking Dame. Maybe like the Lakers. I think that if they had the choice, they're probably taking Dame. They've got guys who already control the ball quite a bit. With other teams, though, I think Fox has proven that he can be a bucket getter. And if you need a guy who does that and you already have a good background, with defensive players, with guys who can, be around the perimeter, Fox would be a great pickup. If I'm Utah, I'm a Utah Jazz fan. It's a tough one. I think that I am going to be choosing Fox. I think Fox, he's still got quite a few years in him. With Markkanen paired up with him, I think Markkanen could be a number one option. I think that he could just as well be a number two option, off the ball, cutting in the basket, open threes type of guy. And Fox could be, the bucket getter. I probably would be taking Fox. Who are you taking, Doc?
I'm going to take Fox as well. Fox is more athletic. He's just barely starting to hit this stride. He was third team. He's going to be third team All NBA. And so even though Dame's going to be first team All NBA, Dame is going to eventually start to decline where Fox is going to continue to hit the incline. And Fox is athletic. He is incredible with under pressure. Not to say that Dame isn't, but I would just take Fox because I think that between, even if they lose to Golden State this year, which they very well could, next year, he's going to be a different player. He's going to be even better. Like Fox is just going to get better and better. And I think that one's going to be a no-brainer. I would roll the dice on a Fox all day.
What's interesting about this one too, Doc, is that if a team has a number one option, maybe if you look at the Cavs, a team like that, or with the Bucks, you're probably going to be choosing Dame. I think he's a good complementary piece who can, provide assists, off-ball threes, who doesn't need to necessarily dominate the ball. With Fox, though, I think he's just such a great player. He's so aggressive and dominant. If you don't have like a real championship number one option, or you don't think you do, I would be taking Fox.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at Fox too, even in this playoff series, look what he's doing against Golden State, who are they're a team they are not slouches on defense.
No.
They've thrown Wiggins at him. They've thrown Draymond Green at him. They threw GP2 at him. And it didn't matter. And those are the three best defenders on Golden State. They threw all of them at D Fox, and none of it mattered. He still gets his buckets. He still finds a way to score. Like the kid's, he's amazing. All right, guys, thank you so much. I think we're going to wrap it up here, but I think we're going to be dropping something Friday too, right? Or Thursday. All right. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Remember to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.